There was no space, no time, no light. Then God spoke. The silence tore open as stars ignited, galaxies spun into position, and the foundations of the earth locked into place. He gathered the dust and breathed life into the first man, then formed the woman. He set them in a garden where every leaf tasted of peace, and the air held no bite of cold or decay. They walked through the tall grass, their feet pressing into soft, damp soil, knowing nothing but the presence of their Creator. But the harmony fractured. Adam and Eve reached for the forbidden fruit, their fingers closing around the cold skin of the harvest. The moment they bit into it, the silence returned, but it was heavy now. The garden did not change, but they did. They felt the sudden, sharp sting of exposure. They scrambled into the shadows of the trees, pushing their backs against rough bark, hiding their faces from the light they once craved. The perfect, unbroken world died in that instant, replaced by the weight of their own choices. Shame settled over them like a shroud, and for the first time, the earth felt vast, cold, and empty. Centuries bled into chaos. Wickedness choked the earth until God commanded Noah to build. He drove iron nails into gopher wood while the sky turned the color of bruised iron. When the rains broke, the world vanished beneath a crushing expanse of gray water. Only the ark remained, rocking on the deep.
When the tides finally retreated, a rainbow shattered the clouds, a vivid, silent promise etched into the sky. Yet,
the cycle of human pride persisted. The people built towers to reach the heavens until their tongues were confused and they scattered to the ends of the earth. From this fractured map, God called Abraham, sparking a lineage that would carry his purpose. His grandson Jacob fathered the tribes, but the path was jagged.
Joseph, the dreamer, was stripped of his position and thrown into a pit by his own kin.
He endured the damp cold of an Egyptian prison, watching the days turn to years. But his story did not end in chains. God elevated him to the halls of power, placing him at the right hand of the Pharaoh. When famine withered the land,
Joseph opened the grain stores, providing for the very brothers who had betrayed him.
Through every act of human malice, a greater plan took root, turning the darkest betrayals into a lifeline for the future. The descendants of Jacob groaned under the weight of Egyptian chains, their lives measured by the lash and the furnace. God heard their cry. He sent Moses to stand before the Pharaoh.
And when the ruler refused, the land shook. 10 plagues scoured the earth until the Red Sea split,
a towering wall of water allowing the people to flee into the wilderness. At the base of Mount Sinai, stone tablets were inscribed with law, binding the people to a covenant.
But the dust had barely settled before they turned to idols of gold and wood. They demanded earthly kings to lead them.
And the nation fractured. Prophets stalked the city gates, their voices raw, as they pleaded for repentance.
But the people blocked their ears. The warnings went unheeded until the sky turned black with smoke.
Jerusalem fell. The temple stones were pried apart and cast down. The people were shackled and dragged into the silence of foreign lands. The land that once held the presence of God became a ruin of broken walls and scorched earth. The prophets went quiet, and the world held its breath in the cold dark, waiting for the promise of a Messiah to mend the jagged edges of a shattered history. The wait ended in a quiet stable. A child was born. Years later, Jesus walked the dust of Galilee.
His hands steady as he restored sight to the blind, he commanded the winds to cease and the waves to fall still.
He spoke of a kingdom that refused to bow to the empires of men.
The religious leaders watched, their hands tightening around their staffs, until they moved to strike. Soldiers swarmed the garden under the cover of night. The betrayal was quick.
The trial was a farce. They led him to the hill, the wood of the cross heavy against his shoulders.
They drove iron through pulse and bone. The sky drained of color. The crowd grew silent.
He hung suspended between the earth and the heavens, the weight of every human failure pressing down upon his frame. The nails held. The wood groaned under the pressure. He felt the cold iron and the heat of the sun, his muscles straining against the inevitable. He looked toward the horizon, a final, ragged breath escaping his lips. The world stopped. He bowed his head, and the burden of all history settled deep into the silence of his sacrifice.
The tomb remained sealed. 3 days passed in absolute, suffocating stillness. The guards stood motionless,
their eyes fixed on the gray slab of stone. Then, the ground beneath their feet shuddered. A low, grinding roar echoed through the garden as the heavy stone rolled aside, revealing a void of blinding light. The soldiers fell back, their hands shielding their faces from the sudden radiance. From the darkness of the burial chamber, a figure stepped forward. The grave linens lay discarded in a heap. He walked out into the cool morning air, his movements fluid and unburdened. Death had lost its grip. The ancient promise, whispered at the dawn of history, stood fulfilled in the light of the rising sun. He moved past the guards and toward the path, his presence reclaiming the world. The gates of heaven, once barred by the weight of human failure,
were now thrown wide. Hope was no longer a distant echo of a forgotten vow, but a living reality.
The story had not ended in the grave. It had only just begun to breathe. For all who looked toward this dawn,
the path is clear, and the broken pieces of the world are finally made whole.